What's up guys? Welcome back to another video. We're glad that you're here joining us again. Today we're gonna go over 10 different points. Each one of these points is going to have significant value to help you go from 0 to 5 units by the end of this video so you can start on your Airbnb journey and scale. But first, I want to set the expectation. So for those of you who do not understand what Airbnb arbitrage is where we find a landlord who is willing to allow us to sublease their property on any OTA. So this could be Airbnb, Booking.com, VRBO, even our own direct booking platform. That is what Airbnb arbitrage is. So we are selling nights and we are renting for a year-long lease. So the year-long lease is gonna have a lower monthly rate, and then we're going to make the difference when we sell individual nights at a higher premium price. What we do is we go in and furnish, add amenities to all of our properties, make sure that they are up to a high quality standard so we can ask for a high ADR or a high average daily rate. But that's what Airbnb arbitrage is, and next I'll go into point 2. So point number 2 is, why is Airbnb arbitrage so powerful? So there's several reasons why Airbnb arbitrage is so powerful, and there's several reasons why Michael and I chose to dive into Airbnb arbitrage. But one of the most popular reasons is Airbnb arbitrage is the lowest barrier to entry in all of real estate. So we are not gonna have to spend $80,000 to $100,000 to $120,000 for our first investment property. We can actually alternatively spend $5,000, $10,000, $15,000 to get into our first deal. You may be asking, well, what do I actually have to spend? What is that $5,000 to $15,000 going to get me? So $5,000 to $15,000, that's gonna cover your first month's rent, possibly your last month's rent. We're gonna try to negotiate that out, security deposit, and then any additional furnishing cost, any additional software setup or vendor setup that's needed. But with $5,000 to $15,000, you can now take on your first unit. We can have return on investments that are higher than any purchase opportunity or any purchase acquisition out there. And this can get our feet wet into real estate. And what I love to call it is renting the business model. So instead of going and purchasing a bunch of assets, taking on a bunch of risk on the front end, we now have the opportunity to rent this business model. So when we're renting the business model, this gives us the opportunity to manage everything, to oversee everything, to understand how this business runs. Now, when we've gathered enough capital, we can take advantage of the tax benefits and the appreciation when we go into a purchase acquisition. But for new investors, for someone who is really trying to understand the ins and outs of short-term rentals, Airbnb, VRBO, all these different platforms, even property management softwares, Airbnb arbitrage is the first place to go. So here on point number 3, I'm gonna talk a little bit about what I covered in point 2, just in more depth, but we're gonna talk about the startup capital. What is it? What all can you expect when getting into Airbnb? So first and foremost, like I mentioned, $5,000 to $15,000 is pretty standard. If you were spending more than $15,000, you probably shouldn't be moving forward with that deal, because then it makes more sense to really just be saving for a purchase opportunity, because we're only holding these leases for 2, 3, 4, maybe 5 years if we have a longer term lease. So our goal here is to make sure that we have as little upfront capital that is invested into this property so we can have the highest back end return. And what I mean by little capital is, again, you're gonna have the first month's rent, you're gonna have the security deposit, you're going to have some of these furnishing costs, but in addition to that, people don't talk about all the software costs. So you're gonna have reoccurring costs with maybe your Ring subscription, maybe your property management software subscription, maybe a pricing software subscription, which all of these are needed to make sure that we're going to reach the highest revenue ceiling that is possible. But all that to be said, we shouldn't be spending more than $15,000. Definitely shouldn't be spending more than $20,000 on a single arbitrage unit to make sure that we can minimize our risk and get all of our money back as quickly as possible. So point number 4, this is probably the most frequently asked question that I receive and Michael receives. What is the best market to get into with Airbnb arbitrage? And there's really 2 ways that I can answer this question. But number 1 is, we actually want to utilize AI, like I was talking about at the beginning of this video. And how we can utilize AI is using different comping software. So the way we're gonna find the best market possible is using a comping software. What is a comping software? It is AirDNA, it is PriceLab's revenue estimator, it can be B&B Calc, it can be Mashvisor, a bunch of different comping softwares that we have. And what this is gonna do, it's gonna give us market data, not only on individual properties, but actually markets as a whole. So we can actually go to PriceLab's revenue estimator, and if we go under the neighborhood data tab, or if we go under the revenue estimator tab, it's actually going to use an AI tool. This is gonna scrape all the data within a mile radius of the subject property that you're trying to take over, or the market that you're gonna take over, even sub-market that you're gonna take over, and it will give you the average daily rate. So your ADR, it'll give you your average occupancy percentage. It'll show you what amenities each one of these properties and what you can expect from this market as a whole. But then in addition to that, we really want to take into consideration regulation as well. So a lot of markets, as many of you may know, they're heavily regulated against Airbnb, VRBO, any type of short-term rental. So we need to make sure first, can we operate legally? So can we get a permit? Are there any additional business tax licenses that we need? And if we can do those things, then we're really in the clear to take a further investigation on this market. And then secondly, making sure that we have solid demand. So what I mean by solid demand, are there a lot of events coming to this place? Are there a lot of travelers coming to this place? Are there a lot of other Airbnbs? Is there a reason that people are going to this market? So what Michael and I are looking for, we're looking for military professionals, we're looking for traveling nurses, or we're looking for remote business professionals, any place that has a business conference. So there's a bunch of different markets that we can utilize. And some of my favorite markets are markets in Tennessee, markets in Florida, markets in Texas that you can acquire a permit in. And if you utilize these AI softwares, if you utilize what I've talked about as far as searching for a market, then you're gonna be in the clear. The next thing that we wanna talk about as far as market data is understanding how to analyze a market. So there's really one thing that we're gonna look at. We're gonna look at what are the long-term rents in that market? What are the average long-term rents? And then what are the average revenues from our comping software? So we're looking at a ratio of rent to revenue. And as a market as a whole, our goal is to be at a 1-to-2 ratio. So we want, for every dollar we have on the long-term rental side, we want $2 on the revenue side. So if we're looking at a 1-to-2 ratio here, we're gonna be in the clear to go ahead and move forward in that market. And it may be a little bit below that. It may be 1-to-1.7 or 1-to-1.6. There's still opportunity in those markets. That's our big goal. If we have a 1-to-2 ratio, we know we're in the clear from rent to revenue. So those are the two ways that I'm gonna analyze markets, utilizing AI and then also manually underwriting as well. And for point number 5, we're gonna talk about deal analysis. But before we dive into this, if you wanna hear more about how Michael and I did not do our deal analysis correctly and we did not do our due diligence correctly and almost got evicted from our first 2 units, click the link in the top right corner and you can watch that video and hear more about that story. But back to what I was talking about as far as deal analysis, as far as analyzing markets, that's great, but now we gotta take it a step further. We have to understand, how are we gonna analyze a deal? How can we make sure that this deal is gonna be profitable? And I'm gonna break this down into a few subcategories for you guys. So number 1, the way that we are going to analyze a deal is first off, we need to make sure that we have a high quality deal. So we're gonna go to the market that you wanna find a deal in. We're gonna take that address and we're gonna plug it into one of the comping softwares that I mentioned in point 4. So AirDNA, B&B Calc, Price Labs Revenue Estimator. If you have one of those softwares, plug it in. It is now going to spit us out a comp set. When we plug that address in, we need to make sure that we click the right bedrooms, click the right bathrooms, and the right amount of guests that can stay in this property. Then it's gonna give us a comp set. On this comp set, we need to make sure that we're looking at good, high quality data. So a lot of people just take the number that AirDNA or B&B Calc or Price Labs Revenue Estimator spits out, but that's not the way that we need to do it. We need to do a deeper dive. So how we're gonna do this is making sure that our properties that we're seeing in the comp set have at least 270 days available, or they have at least a minimum of 15 reviews. And the reason this is so important is because there is so much bad data. And if we're comping with bad data, we're gonna end up projecting numbers and putting ourselves in a bad position when we move forward on a property, or actually keeping ourselves from moving forward on a property that we should have moved forward on. So as we go through our data set, we're looking at these 2 things. If they check both of these boxes, we can then move forward into further due diligence. And then really when we're comping deals and we're doing a deal analysis, we just need to make sure everything is apples to apples. So if we have a property that's a 3-bedroom, 2-bath with a pool with moderate upgrades and granite countertops, we need to find a comp that has the exact same thing. This is going to make a fair deal analysis. And then in addition to that, we need to make sure location is within really a 2-mile radius at the most. If it fits in all those boxes, then we have a really good comp to make sure that we run our numbers correctly. So now that we have done deal analysis, we can jump into point number 6, which is negotiating with landlords. This is probably one of the hardest things to do with the Airbnb arbitrage space in making sure that you scale. So it's so important that you have the right strategies and tactics in order to negotiate with landlords. So I think the place where most people get hung up when negotiating is they come off as they've never done this before, or it's gonna be a side business or a side hustle, and that is the complete wrong way to do it. We need to get the guard down of the landlord that we're communicating with and make sure that we present ourselves as an actual business. business because we are. And we need to present immense value to the landlord that we're actually pitching to. So what this would look like is if I'm on the phone with the landlord and I say, hey, Mr. Landlord, how would it sound if I were to manage your property for free? I don't charge you a management fee to manage your property, but then I pay you your rent every single month. If you start off like this, if you have talked about the property and you've built rapport and then you start your pitch off just like that, I promise you that landlord's guard's gonna come down significantly. And then in addition to that, we can even take it a step further. We can say, Mr. Landlord, I know you're concerned about wear and tear, but your property is my business. So in order for me to run a 5-star business, I need to keep your property in 5-star shape. This shows a higher level of professionalism, and it shows that you know what you're doing and that you have done this previously. Even if you haven't, it's important that you show up confident and you have a plan of attack. I think a lot of people, they don't understand what their business model is either. So this is another way that we can really show up more professional to the landlord that we're gonna speak with. So what this would mean is map out everything that you're gonna do with the property. Map out how are you gonna manage turnovers. Map out how are you going to make sure that this deal is profitable so he can guarantee his rent every single month. And if we come with a full-on business plan and if we come with a full-on strategy to this landlord and then we use a couple of those tactics along the way, it's gonna be a no-brainer for the landlord to go ahead and move forward and work with us. So going into step number 7, we need to make sure that we launch the unit efficiently. So I think a lot of people get hung up in being too involved in the day-to-day task when launching the unit, when they really need to be focused as a business owner and how to automate everything. So what Michael and I do for all of our properties is we are going to leverage vendors as much as we can. This is how we are able to launch units that we've never even been to. So what this looks like is Michael and I will reach out to dozens of interior designers. We'll reach out to dozens of cleaners, dozens of handymen. And the reason that we're doing this is because we want to find the best rate that we possibly can find to make sure that someone else can do the work for us and it still fit within our budget. So Michael and I, whenever we're setting up a unit, we'll reach out to an interior designer. We'll talk about our plan, our design, what we're looking for, and then ask them if they can fit their design fee along with all the material cost into their budget. A lot of the times they're gonna say no, so it takes a lot of dials. But if you pick up the phone and you're willing to put in the work on the front end, you can find someone who can set up your property within your budget and it can go smoother than what you can do. When people burn out, it's because they're hanging everything, they're setting everything up. They ordered 1 million boxes on Amazon and half the order didn't show up. We need to delegate that task to someone else because in the meantime, we need to be setting up our management processes and systems. So what this looks like is we need to make sure that we're setting up our hospitable. We need to make sure that we're setting up everything with all of our listings. So if we have a direct booking, if we have VRBO, if we have Airbnb, we need to make sure that we're setting up our pricing softwares because all these things are gonna help us manage everything remotely. And if we're hung up in moving boxes and everything like that, then we're not gonna be able to set those things up. So the goal for this step is make sure that we automate everything that we possibly can. So we can do AI automation with our guest communication, and that's what we need to be focused on setting up. And then we can also automate having our vendors come into our property, make sure everything's set up. Point number 8 is an extension of point 7. It is scaling from 1 to 5 units. How are we gonna scale? So we got our property set up. We understand that we need Hospitable or another property management software. We understand that we need a pricing software. We understand that we need all these things, but now how are we gonna scale? Scaling is finding the bottleneck of your business, implementing someone in that bottleneck to now expand the workflow. It allows you to move to another place in the business to continue acquiring units. So let me break that down for you a little bit. If we are stuck in the day-to-day guest communication, that is not where our time is most efficiently spent if we plan on scaling our business. So what we need to do is we've set up our management processes and systems. I break this down into 2 documents. We need to take note on a management document of everything, all the ins and outs of our property. So when do guests check in? When do guests check out? Are there any issues that guests face during their stay? Any other information that we would need to write down about that property. If we have that information, now we can take that document and we can train a virtual assistant that we can get overseas on using Upwork for a very affordable price to now manage our property during the work week. Because now what this allows them to do is they understand everything about that property. So now they can communicate clearly with the guest and now we can focus more on acquisitions. On top of that, if we want to take that a step further, we need to set standards for our team. Everything that happens below us is ultimately a result of our fault. It is our fault. So we need to make sure that we set standards and expectations for the people that we hire to put them in the right seat of the bus to be set up for success in order for our business to continue growing. So as soon as we get a virtual assistant to take over guest communication, commission and coordinating vendors and doing any other additional tasks like filing claims or setting pricing or updating our listing. Now what we can do is we can go out and acquire more deals. This is how we scale. How can we automate the things that need to be automated? How can we set up our business operation for success? And now how can we get outside the business and go find more deals to plug back into our business? This is how you go from scaling from 1 to 5 units, but it takes time. The last thing that you want to do is rush and hire someone before you are ready to hire someone. Make sure you understand the information about your properties, communicate that clearly to the person that you're bringing in. So now that we have covered points 1 through 8 of all of the operation side and acquisition side of how to set up your first deal and how to scale, now I'm going to talk about some common mistakes to avoid. So this is really going to break down into 3 different points. Point number 1 is regulation. A lot of people are operating in the gray. And what I mean by operating in the gray is they're operating in places that you are not allowed to have short-term rentals because revenue is going to be higher. However, I do not think this is a very sustainable model if we're talking about Airbnb arbitrage. And the reason I say this is because Michael and I have been there before. Imagine being set up in units and then you end up getting kicked out of the units 6 months down the road because the city doesn't allow it. And you've just spent all that money on furniture or all that money on setup and you haven't recouped your investment. It is very risky and not sustainable. That is how you lose money quick in Airbnb arbitrage, not paying attention to regulation. Number 2 is making sure that we have high quality furnishings. And I'm not talking about like designer furniture or anything like that. I'm just talking about something that is up to the level of the competition whenever we did our deal analysis. So if we're comparing an apples to apples property, making sure our property has those granite countertops, those hardwood floors, maybe the pool, any other amenity, and then the furnishings that we put in there, making sure that we have a theme, making sure that we have a design. Because if we have those things, then we're going to be set up for success and hit the numbers that we analyzed on step number 5 there. So, and then lastly, point number 3 of mistakes to avoid is if we do not have systems, we are going to burn out. So like I was talking about with scaling, a lot of people, unfortunately, they do not plug in a virtual assistant to handle guest communication. They don't plug in different AI automation tools with their automated pricing or their neighborhood data or really any of their automated messages that go out to guests. They're not setting those things up. And all this leads to is them doing more work. We don't want to build a job for ourselves. We want to build a business. So if we are not setting up the right systems and the right operations, we're eventually going to burn out. I see it happen with hosts all the time. So make sure to avoid these 3 things, because if you don't avoid these 3 things, you're going to be in trouble and you're eventually going to either burn out or your business is going to crash and burn. And step number 10 is just repeat the process. You now have everything you need to know. We talked about points 1 to 8 about all the acquisition and operation part of setting up your Airbnb business. And then point number 9 is everything to avoid doing. You have all the information that you need to go and take action. But if you want in-depth help, if you want someone to really hold your hand and help you through this process, and you want all the tools and templates and resources that Michael and I have used to go from 0 to 10 units over the last 2.5 years across 6 different US markets, what we need you to do is just click the link below, book a strategy call with us, and we can definitely help you out. But if you like this video, if you felt like this video was helpful, comment, like, subscribe. We're dropping new videos every single week, and we are here to help you guys and see you guys grow in your journey with Airbnb arbitrage.